Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric, this being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Sinner. A lot of things went down in this episode that we got to break down. I really like that we kind of had this moment of this episode, a big part of this episode is the falling apart of Heather and Harry, because they seem like they were on the same side, but now it's like they get further and further because Heather wants to constantly push Vera, whereas Harry's kind of a little softballing things towards her because he's not so quick to because Heather's acting at this because of the whole Marin situation, because it's a combination of she knows something happened to Marin and she wants answers for it, but I think it's also because she feels responsible, because she's like, if I had done more back then, Marin wouldn't have even been there in Mosswood in the first place for something to have happened to her. So it's a combination of her, at least if I can do something for her now, maybe that can kind of make up for the fact that if I can get some justice for her. It's also finding out the truth about it, because she doesn't, because she ends up talking about it later on when they're talking to the chief and everything, because she's like, yeah, I say, once again, I keep calling him the chief. I don't know if he's just Liddell, she keeps talking about the fact is that she didn't tell him at first because she wanted to find out on her own, because she was close to Marin, so she wanted to find out the truth first and foremost before she commented on it. She needed to know first and foremost. So all the while Harry's confronting Vera about his session, because it turns out he asked to stay in that room to the hotel manager, and just all that time's kind of a blank. Vera has some of the pieces, because it's just kind of he was just normal and then he left. She's like, you seemed like you were all right. He's like, I wasn't all right, because he doesn't remember that time frame. Because she's like, because it's interesting, because it seems like his reaction is not the typical reaction, which we see a reaction with the whole the work. And it turns out, I didn't realize this last episode, that person in the video is home dude Glenn, who beat a random person up. Yeah, that was totally him. I didn't really notice that last episode till they kind of pointed it out this episode. It's just kind of interesting. I'll kind of dive into that in a little bit. But the fact is, he has such a violent reaction. It seems like it's kind of all across the board how people will react. But I guess the way he reacted isn't your typical manner, because we still don't know 100% of what was said when he was kind of in that trance or whatever. She kind of says he didn't say anything. He just kind of left and walked away after he said what he said. From what the point Harry could remember, he said and he just got up and left. Beyond that, we don't 100% know what he did in that time frame. So that was kind of an interesting thing. But it's all kind of gets connected to the fact is, it's for Heather, it's she feels like he's constantly taking Vera's side, especially because, like I said, because Vera gave up the information willingly. Because she's I don't trust you. But she's like, we need you to be on, as a, someone for the defense to call as a witness, because going to trial won't be an easy thing. Because by pleading not guilty, they go into a trial and everything. Obviously, Julian doesn't understand any of this because it's the outside world. All he's known is Mosswood anyway his entire life. So this world seems weird and foreign to him. Doesn't make any sense, which we'll dive into in a little bit too. But so he doesn't really know what's going on. And his mom's constantly, Vera's constantly lying to him, because it's the whole conversation her and Heather had about the whole Marin thing. She was denying it. But when Julian was asking what they were talking about, because I know it was about me, and she's like, no, it wasn't. You don't have to worry about it. And that pissed him off, because it's for him, he constantly feels like his mom is lying. We kind of understand a little bit later on when Julian ends up talking about the fact is the reason why he doesn't want to talk to his mom, but he only talks to Harry, is because the dream he had, he knows it's real, but his mom keeps telling him it's just a dream, so he knows she's lying about it. Because it turns out the person that was visiting him, it knows that's real. My mind immediately after kind of hearing that more, I was like, I thought they were going to reveal in the episode. I don't think they are. I think it's his mom. I think it's his biological mom, Marin. I think she tried this because the dream happened a couple weeks ago, and it starts piecing a lot of stuff together. Marin is still alive. She's just kind of off the reservoir, I think. Not reservoir. I don't know what I think the word I was looking for was reservation, in the sense of she's trying to hide from Mosswood, because if she was around, if there was any signs of her, they'd probably come after her, try to make her disappear and fix things, Not necessarily. It could end in a similar thing as an Adam and Beth situation, because it might turn out that Mosswood kind of does that a lot, potentially. Who knows? But I think that's what that whole storage unit was about. All the clothes they were packing, Adam and Bess, they were taking Julian to his biological mom. That's what I'm thinking. That's what this was all about. It's so clear to me now in that sense. Like that's the only because Julian's assuming it was a guy that came to him. I'm thinking it was Marin. Like, I think that's what we're going to find out. That she is still alive and well. She's just hidden herself away. And the only people who had contact with her was Adam and Bess. I guess it's because Adam and Bess weren't really into this whole thing anyway. Well, Adam and Bess kind of had their whole thing. So it's probably like them being a thing probably wasn't okay with Mosswood rules. But as we see kind of looking into the past, Bess kind of had her reservations about this in the first place. She wasn't there as long. That was kind of the whole thing Vera had previously talked about in the past. In a sense of like earlier episodes talking about the fact is Bess, that was even more of an incentive to leave. They were just probably going to go off and be happy all their own, but it's also about taking Julian to his biological mom. They didn't want to tell him too much because, it would have been overwhelming to find out like, oh, your mom that you thought was your mom isn't your mom. She's a fake mom, but your real mom's out there. She set this whole thing up. That's what I'm thinking. Hence why that tape is there and everything. Maybe that tape was meant to be insurance for Marin if at any point in time something happened. Because it's also like, well, who else would use the name Julian for the name for the storage unit? So that's what I'm assuming. I'm kind of leaning towards a thought process that maybe it could be Lionel Jeffries, but part of me thinks Lionel Jeffries is dead. Reason why we kind of haven't heard hiding her hair of him. And I think Marin probably killed him and she's been covering it up this entire time is what I'm thinking about, because she figured she would suffer ramifications from Mosswood. Like there would be no getting away from, which kind of plays a part in this episode. Cause we end up finding out like things at Mosswood aren't really that great. Like we saw Vera like being on the other end of like one of those trances for somebody. Like it turns out, like I thought last episode, I wasn't 100% sure about the whole situation with Glenn. Like now I know it's Glenn, but at the time I didn't realize it was him. The person he was beating up wasn't his dad. It's just that he's in a trance and the person in front of him, you have someone there to kind of represent like whoever draws those emotions out for you. Like that guy in particular, Vera was dealing with back in the past. It was basically, he saw Vera as his ex-wife and has basically get all these frustrated feelings out, which is scary because he's got his hands all over her face. He's being aggravated. He's screaming and you almost feel like he's going to hurt her. But Vera kind of just like, no, it's okay. It's just kind of giving the excuses, kind of like, oh yeah, that's just how the work. It's all important. It's part of the work. And like I said, Bess had her reservations about it because she's like, is that really how that's supposed to be? Even Vera, even being as committed to this as she was still a little freaked out herself. Then there's the whole Marin situation. She meets with Lionel, and you could tell something was going to go down the moment. It's like, oh, she goes in there to have the meeting with him, and you look and notice it's like he has a bed in his room. It's supposed to be like an office. Yeah, there's a bed in here, and then like the whole like they're having the conversations, and you see the look on Vera's face. It's like, yeah. He's one of those sex cult leaders where it's kind of like, oh, join my cult and I sex you. Also, there's the whole thing we ended up finding out about like the kid situation. You can only have kids once you reach a higher, God, what was the word advanced work. Once you start getting into the advanced work, once you get to the advanced levels, then you can have kids, which is an interesting thing because if you notice, no one present day has a kid. So no one has reached that plateau yet, essentially. And Marin, I thought it was kind of interesting because it's something we did already learn about Marin was the fact is the whole thing about her and her mom. It's like my mom wishes I didn't exist. It's like I can't do that same thing to another child. So for her, she was going to run, which makes the whole her and Heather thing very interesting because Heather, like in the past, came to her and was kind of like, no, we'll go back and everything. But she's like, no. And she's kind of saying some very mean like stuff to her, just telling her to grow up. The fact of the matter is you don't know what's best for me. I'm assuming that's her pushing her away because she know getting away from Mosswood wouldn't be easy, maybe impossible. She can't just leave whenever she wants to. Maybe it's something like that, and maybe in her own way she was trying to protect Heather, or maybe she kind of felt at that time like she didn't have anyone she can trust. Because at that time, Heather wasn't speaking her truth, because Heather's like, I'm your best friend. Yeah, that thing that happened that night, I was just drunk and stupid. And she's like, yeah, just like everyone else in town, right? It's because what she said before, Heather doesn't want to admit like, oh, I'm gay and I have feelings for you, I love you type of thing, it's just kind of like, no, you're my best friend. It's like, can't we just go back to simpler times? She wants to rewind the clock. So it's just kind of interesting to me on that front. Um, So I chalk that up immediately to that, but we'll kind of have to wait and see. What I also think is interesting is because this whole situation about Glenn and obviously him not wanting to answer stuff, it was kind of interesting too because it's like, wait a minute, was that the only recording? He's like, wait a minute, you think there might be other recordings? You've been to Mosswood more than once or twice. It's like, yeah, the way he's not answering questions and stuff like that, he's lying, being like, oh, there was no one there that I was beating up. That was just myself. It's like, why would you lie about that? Because it's a thing that happened and Mosswood just covered it up. That was someone that you either beat. I'm thinking you beat them to death. It wasn't that they just got beaten bad. It was like, that's probably why Vera was also scared because she knows like how those things could turn out in that regard. So, because it makes you wonder, because like obviously when that happened, we saw Marin was there and she was just kind of accepting it. Like I said, at least in Bess's case, when it came to that situation with, the Vera and that dude situation, like she kind of got a little freaked out, but like Marin as well as everyone else was just kind of like nonchalant. They were just kind of accepting. Like I said, it's kind of like this whole trance that not just everyone's in, it's just kind of like it's just an accepted thing. So maybe he did something to him or terrified them or something. I don't know. His whole thing is weird. He definitely got that sex cult vibe feel to him. Because all the like powerful and everything, just every word out of his mouth just sounds like bullshit, you know? Especially later on, because they basically sacrificed, what was it, a goat or a calf? I want to say it was probably on the more side of a goat. They sacrificed an animal. Even telling Vera to name it and stuff like that, because it needs to be like, it needs to channel all their frailties as people, and it'll be this great release. And it's like, oh, look, things have changed, and we can go further with the work and stuff like that. It makes you wonder, like, is there more to the whole Sessions thing? Because obviously the whole Dr. Poole thing, like he did abortions and stuff like that. So people getting pregnant came about long enough. Is it like a sex situation? It seems like it's a situation that only he's like, oh yeah, like I said, I'm sure he's going to come up with some lying excuse about like what it's all about, like, oh, that this is part of the process, or, you know, whatever BS he's got to say. Because obviously, once again, because Julian's his kid. So he even talked about the fact that he wanted Julian to stay. Maybe because I wonder what made him decide that. Because, like I said, the conversation made it seem like they do have frequent abortions, which is kind of crazy thing to say, but maybe they don't. Maybe that's the first time he's ever impregnated anyone under those circumstances. Considering the fact is he was kind of like, wait, she's pregnant. Oh, wow. You know, so it must be the first time. It must be a situation of if you come in pregnant or you're with your significant other while you're at Mosswood and they get pregnant. Like maybe you still can have the whole couple thing potentially. Maybe, I don't know what that's, but if you have a baby, you have to give them up. But because it's his baby, it makes it different. Like we still don't 100% understand his mentality behind everything. Maybe he was kind of a nobody before, which I guess kind of makes sense. Because there was those cases like against the allegations of abuse and stuff like that, that maybe it's kind of a thing where like he was shunned from the world and he created Mosswood where he could be revered and treated as like this enlightened, connected person. And he's just some self-indulgent asshole who got away with doing some terrible shit in the past, and now he just feels like he can do whatever he wants here. He just gotta like pretty it up and put it in a little bow. That's how I'm chalking that situation up. But we'll have to wait to see more on that front. I kept getting a feeling like Heather's dad isn't being very truthful about a lot of stuff. Like it seems like at one point in time he's trying to get her to drop this whole situation, especially later on because he calls Harry out for it. Because essentially when it's all said and done, Heather kind of like says like, yeah, this whole Harry thing kind of has to hint, and Heather's willing to go back and do other work. But Harry kind of realizes there's a lot more to this than just Heather feeling the way she did. She kind of got pissed because it's like, yeah, you're more on Vera's side than you are mine. We can't be working together if that's going to be the case. But it's like, oh yeah, Heather's got other cases she needs to be working on. But it's more so like everyone in Keller wants this case shut down because it's too much trouble. It's just like, hey, let the Julian situation play out the way it's supposed to. But it's like, no, there's more to this. This kid, like, we all feel sad for him, but this is just the way it is. It's just kind of like, no, you know, Harry doesn't believe that. And so Jack is kind of blaming Harry. It's like, oh, you should have left sooner. It's so interesting considering the fact is you're the one that so openly invited him. And now that things aren't going the way you wanted them to, you're kind of being an asshole because of what Heather said. And it's like, oh, she's got to look out for her career. Plus the fact of the matter is like when she was looking at all those pictures about Marin, like, she wouldn't get the answer. He was just kind of like, oh yeah, clear the table. I want ice cream. It's like, he's super quick to change the subject because Harry even confronted him. It's like, oh yeah, one of your friends, Glenn, is part of this Mosswood thing. It's like, oh, you're pretty tight with him, huh? It's like, if you got something to say, say it, but he didn't. But I'm pretty sure that's him implying like, you cover stuff, you are connected to this Mosswood thing in a sense of you cover stuff up. Whatever happened with Marin, like it could be another possibility. It could go against it definitely goes against what I brought up before, Marin still being alive. But if something happened all those years ago, he probably covered it up, hence why. Because he was a cop too, wasn't he? Ain't that Jack's whole deal, I think? So he could easily be in a position to cover that up, and I think that's what, cause I feel like, once again, we don't know the full conversation about what him and, Marin actually talked about, because for one, Heather was drunk at the time and she was in the car, so she wouldn't refer the conversation, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, you're hearing Jack's perspective. Who's to say, like, he's telling the truth? And it's something, Harry had, touched on too. It's like in Keller, nobody says anything. Everyone just kind of tries to pretend like everything's fine. It's like no one says anything. So, I mean, once again, it's like, that's why I feel like Glenn is acting the way he is, because it's like, you killed someone, and the reason why Jack's acting the way he is, because it would mean bringing up a lot of people's skeletons, not just a lot of people in town skeletons. That's why, like, everyone's probably trying to get this as hush-hush as possible. Probably, Liddell as well as Jack, in particular. Like he's been so, I don't know, the way he's acted his entire season was kind of interesting to me. And it's trying to be like, oh yeah, like it was, oh, the reason why they haven't talked and stuff, it's more so Harry's fault. And then, oh, here's to not changing or something like that. It was just kind of interesting to me. I hadn't forgotten to talk about it, but there is a whole thing about Julian kind of feeding more into what I was bringing up earlier about him not understanding this world. Was the fact is that those kids were making fun of him, and he didn't understand why. They were just being the assholes they were about the whole, like, putting rocks over their eyes, and it just pissed him off. He attacked one kid and got locked up. And just for him, it just feels like everything I do is wrong. Like, this, because it's, like I said, it's a world he doesn't know. It's kind of like the whole messed up situation of this Mosswood thing. Like, he literally grew up only in Mosswood, surrounded by it. Obviously, that's the whole thing that Lionel was kind of pushing for, the whole, like, channeling of everything through him. He'll be kind of the centerfold that everybody takes care of. So kind of feeding into why, once again, there was only one kid in Mosswood is because it's Lionel's thing. So I'm curious, like, what happens going forward with this whole Vera situation. Like, I like that this episode kind of dived a lot into Vera in particular. We kind of got things a little more from her perspective, the past in general when it comes to Mosswood, because we also learned from Harry that Glenn's family has a deep connection to him. Well, the Fishers in general, because like they had that land for like since the 1930s, and then in 97 they sold it to Lionel Jeffries for whatever reason. Maybe they're definitely connected to Mosswood, so maybe it's a sense of he helped them out because like they did some shady stuff, so he was helping cover stuff for them, or maybe they were avid believers and then they built this whole thing around him to protect him because they, because of the whole abuse thing. Like, it's like, oh, this disrespected dude that we care about and believe in so much. It's like, oh, so the world is turning against him, so we'll build a community that centers around him. Maybe that type of thing. Maybe in general they just get their own benefits from it. Anyway, like I said, so much we not really 100% sure about. I'm very interested to see whether any of my thoughts about this are right going forward into the next episode. I mean, especially what is Harry going to do now, because apparently he's no longer kind of working the case, supposedly. Obviously, a little divide between him and Heather, so like what's going to happen beyond that? So, because I know Heather mainly got really pissed because Harry was like, yeah, you're not going to find the answers in the bottom of the lake, which is kind of a spit in the face to her, because it's just like, yeah, you're not working this investigation like you were before. Like, you went on your little dates with Vera and now you're not helping me out anymore. I brought you here to help me with this case, but you got your own agenda type of thing. At the same time, it's just because, like, Heather's taking this very personal because of the whole Marin thing, so she's not looking at it from the right perspective. She's just now that she probably thinks Marin is dead, she probably doesn't really want to look anymore. She's just kind of like, yeah, leave it at that, type of thing. So hence why she's trying to dive into another word. But like I said, we'll just have to wait and see what goes down in the next episode, especially between Heather and Harry and how this whole investigation goes forward. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.